What? I had just returned from studying abroad when the butler suddenly informed me that my grandfather wanted me to get married soon. Or else I'd be kicked out and wouldn't inherit the family fortune. As I heard the butler speak, I looked at him in disbelief. My previously pleasant mood while leisurely trimming my nails instantly vanished. I had only just reached the legal age for marriage, and now I was being told to get married immediately. I stared at the butler incredulously, trying to detect any hint in his eyes or expression that my grandfather might be joking. But no matter how I looked at him, the butler's expression remained dead serious. My name is Mabel Shaw, the sole heir to the Shaw Group and granddaughter of Crispin Shaw. When I was young, my parents died in a car accident. As Crispin Shaw's only living relative and the sole heir to the Shaw Group, my grandfather doted on me immensely since childhood. Apart from his work hours, he devoted all his time to me. Later, when I wanted to further my studies, I chose to study abroad. And now here I was, a beautiful young woman in the prime of her life. Showered with love and affection, wealthy, carefree, and gorgeous, suddenly being pressured into marriage. I couldn't believe it. I weakly asked, "Frank, grandfather must be joking, right? How could my grandfather, who loved me so much, bear to throw me out? Miss, the master said that if you're not married by the end of this month, he requests that you leave this house." I fell into deep thought. I was single. Where on earth was I supposed to find someone to marry? The end of the month arrived. I had just returned from shopping with my best friend. As soon as I entered the house, I saw my grandfather sitting formally on the sofa with a very serious expression. I handed my shopping bags to the butler and sat down next to my grandfather, smiling as I said, "Grandpa." I took his hand and shook it gently. My grandfather didn't say much more, just glanced at me sideways before speaking directly, "Butler." "Yes, sir." "Go help the young miss pack her things and throw them out." "Very well." The butler answered and prepared to go upstairs to my room to pack, without paying any attention to me. I panicked immediately. I jumped up and ran to block the butler's way, afraid he would really go pack my things. If I was kicked out, where would I live? I had thought my grandfather was joking before, but I never imagined he really intended to throw me out. My heart sank. Apart from me, my grandfather had no other relatives. Who else would he give his fortune to if not me? If I was thrown out, I'd have nowhere to live. At this thought, I unconsciously gripped the butler's arm even tighter. The butler knew the master just wanted to scare me, so he didn't actually intend to go upstairs. He just pretended to move while I held on to him. While holding the butler's hand, I urgently said to my grandfather, Wait, Grandpa, what are you doing? Could you really bear to let me live alone? I'm your only granddaughter. I'll definitely suffer if I go out on my own." I tried to appeal to my grandfather's sympathy by playing the pity card. "I notified you earlier that you needed to be married by the end of the month, or I would make you move out." My grandfather replied directly, without any unnecessary words. He didn't even look at me, showing no sign of being unable to bear it. It seemed he didn't care at all what happened to me if I left. Marriage isn't a trivial matter. Besides, I'm single now. Who am I supposed to marry? Surely you don't want me to just grab someone off the street and hastily get married? I put on a pitiful expression and persisted, hoping my grandfather would see my innocence. My grandfather completely ignored me and turned his head away in silence. Seeing that my grandfather wasn't falling for my act, I pouted and made a plaintive sound. "If you want me to get married, that's fine, but at least give me some time. Let me get to know some men first. There's a suitable man right here, 6 feet 1 inch, 25 years old, single, and wealthy. He's perfect for you." My grandfather immediately replied as soon as he heard me agree to marriage, completely disregarding whether I was sincere or not. "What?" I was dumbfounded. What kind of move was this? You're both single. You're perfect for each other. My grandfather continued promoting him to me, paying no attention to my reaction. "Grandpa, you can't do this." I looked at him reproachfully, my expression full of disagreement. "If you don't marry him, then you can go live on your own," my grandfather said bluntly, without wasting words. "I don't even know him." "Aren't you afraid he might be a bad man who'll mistreat your granddaughter?" I looked at my grandfather. "He won't. He's my war buddy's grandson. His name is Elmer Landor. He's mature, steady, and a good man worthy of entrusting you to. My grandfather said, his expression even more serious. What if I don't agree? My grandfather's tone suggested I had no choice, but I still wanted to struggle a bit. Butler. My grandfather wasn't going to waste any more words with me. No, I'll agree, okay? Seeing my grandfather's stance, I felt that if I didn't agree, he might actually send me out to beg on the streets today without relenting. Hearing my agreement, my grandfather's severe expression immediately changed to a beaming smile. Very well, let's go to the register office now. What? Where is he? Where's Elmer? You don't need to worry about that. Fine then. After all, Elmer and I didn't know each other. After the marriage, I could find some excuses and then divorce him. It didn't matter whether he showed up or not. The butler drove my grandfather and me to the register office. When we got out of the car, there was only a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s standing next to the car. I turned my head and looked around, but there was no one else. My heart started pounding. Surely my marriage partner wasn't him? Although I didn't want to discriminate based on looks, this was really too much. He didn't match me at all. Standing next to him, people would definitely think we were father and daughter. My expression suddenly looked constipated. Although I had decided to have a fake marriage, I didn't want to marry someone who looked 40 or 50 years old and was slightly balding. Was I really going to marry someone like this? The young master had some business to attend to. He said I could handle the paperwork on his behalf. I had overthought things. My grandfather nodded and said, "Let's go." Just like that, I was pushed into becoming a married woman. Throughout the entire marriage process, Elmer never appeared. You wouldn't believe it, but 3 years passed and I never once met my nominal husband. It wasn't until later when the TV happened to be on a financial news channel, and the butler pointed out that it was the young master that I realized this was my husband. He had time to appear on TV but no time to meet me. This marriage felt like no marriage at all. Apart from gaining an unknown husband, I didn't know what had changed in my life. Elmer never showed up, and my grandfather didn't seem to care. After 3 years, I really felt I'd had enough of this. Divorce, I definitely wanted a divorce. I didn't care anymore. I had originally planned to pretend with Elmer, to fake that we weren't getting along, and then have him cooperate with me. I never expected he wouldn't even give me the chance, simply not showing up at all. I drafted a divorce agreement and had the butler deliver it to Elmer. That was when Elmer found out he was married. When he received this news, Elmer was sitting in his office dealing with some tricky documents. His train of thought was suddenly interrupted, and he remembered that he was actually married. At the time of the marriage, he had simply arranged for his assistant to handle it. The marriage certificate was kept by his grandfather, and he had very little involvement in the whole process. Usually busy with work, he had forgotten he was a married man. He never expected that the next time he heard about it would be when the other party notified him of wanting a divorce. Elmer felt a mix of emotions. Ever since I notified Elmer that I wanted a divorce, I felt much more relaxed. Although the marriage had felt non-existent before, I was still a young woman who hadn't experienced sweet love but had become a married person. I always felt restricted in many ways, feeling guilty when I went out to flirt with handsome guys. I wanted to pursue handsome men. I wanted to have romantic moments under the moonlight with good-looking guys. It's the weekend, and I slept in until I naturally woke up. Last night, I went shopping with my best friend for far too long, and I was utterly exhausted. When I got home, I did my skincare routine and immediately collapsed into bed, sleeping until the phone rang. This early in the morning, I was still incredibly drowsy. I groggily picked up the phone and hung up, then closed my eyes, wanting to continue sleeping. Just as I put the phone down, it rang again. I sighed and answered, "Hello?" My voice was still thick with sleep. "It's my birthday tonight. Remember to come to the Moonshine Bar at 8 o'clock, Daphne said without preamble. All right, I need to keep sleeping. Don't bother me, I replied, hanging up before she could say anything else. She's so annoying, always waking me up from my cozy bed in the morning. Daphne is my best friend. We've grown up together since we were little. She always has boundless energy, even though we had been shopping until late last night. This morning, she's still full of vitality. I truly admire her. It's as if she's a robot that never gets tired. As evening approached, I got dressed up a bit, applied some light makeup, and arrived at the venue with a gift as promised. It was too crowded and noisy. I searched for a long time before I finally spotted Daphne in the center of the crowd. I squeezed through with difficulty to reach her side and tapped her on the shoulder. Daphne turned around, saw me, and smiled while dancing. She said, "You're here," then continued dancing, completely ignoring me. I'm used to it. Watching Daphne immersed in the moment, unable to pay attention to me. I walked to the bar and ordered a low-alcohol sparkling wine. I sipped it while watching them dance, too tired from last night to have any energy. As I drank and watched Daphne dancing enthusiastically in the crowd, I suddenly felt someone's gaze on me. I turned my head to see a man holding a drink, swirling it while looking at me with an uncomfortable stare. I glanced at him, then quietly turned away and moved a bit further, feeling he had ill intentions. "Hello, beautiful. Are you alone?" The man, seeing me move away, came closer and spoke with a sleazy smile. I ignored his attempt to chat me up and continued watching Daphne and the others dance. But he completely failed to sense my discomfort and moved even closer, then reached out to touch my hand. This blatant harassment made me instinctively slap him across the face. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. I hadn't meant to slap him, it was just a reflex when I saw him trying to touch me. I looked at him, then at my hand, which was still tingling from the impact. The man looked stunned, his face quickly turning red, his expression contorting in what seemed to be the prelude to anger. That's when panic set in. Without thinking, I put down my glass and ran towards the exit. The man finally reacted to being slapped and got up to chase me. I kept running desperately forward when suddenly I saw a familiar-looking figure ahead. Without hesitation, I rushed over, grabbed onto them, and shouted, "Help!" As I looked up, to my surprise, it was my husband Elmer, whom I hadn't seen in 3 years. Our eyes met, and neither Elmer nor I expected to meet in this situation. But given the circumstances, there was no time to dwell on the complexities of our relationship, or for me to enact any of the 108 divorce scenarios I had imagined. Right now, I just wanted to survive. "Save me, someone's chasing me." I had barely finished speaking when I heard a menacing and threatening voice behind me. "You little wretch, where do you think you're running? How dare you hit me? I'll make you pay for this." The sound made my heart tremble. Elmer was the only person I could cling to now, though I didn't know if he would help me. I hung on to him, my hands and feet involuntarily starting to slip as I felt I could barely stand. "What's going on?" Elmer grabbed hold of me and looked down at me sternly. I looked up, my heart skipping a beat involuntarily. He looked even more handsome up close than on TV. This woman offended me. "I advise you not to meddle in other people's business." The man who had been chasing me spoke again, interrupting my wandering thoughts. I didn't have time to admire Elmer's good looks anymore and hurriedly said, "No, he was harassing me." I looked up at him pitifully. Because I had been drinking and had just run in a panic, my face was particularly flushed, and my eyes were bright and glistening. Elmer looked at me, then at the menacing man opposite us. He raised an eyebrow slightly and said very calmly, "And what if I do want to get involved?" He then steadied me on my feet. The man looked at Elmer, then at me. Elmer appeared slim, and now he was also burdened with me. He didn't look like someone who could fight. The man, on the other hand, was a big bloke who often worked out and was quite muscular, easily lifting dumbbells. After a quick mental calculation, he thought he could defeat Elmer. "Then don't blame me for not being polite," he said as he charged forward to attack. The moment I saw the man make his move, for some reason, I felt a twinge of concern for Elmer in my heart. I was terribly afraid he really wouldn't be able to beat this man. To my surprise, Elmer wasn't flustered at all. He simply put me aside, completely unfazed by the man's attack. As the man rushed towards him, Elmer raised his hand and in just a few moves had the man pinned to the ground. Just as Elmer was about to kick the man, he immediately begged for mercy. "I'm sorry, mate, I'm sorry, don't hit me," he said, raising his hands to protect his face, afraid Elmer would stomp on it. Elmer coldly looked at the man, and seeing his terrified expression, he lowered his foot and straightened his clothes. "Get lost," he said. Granted this reprieve, the man immediately stood up and ran away, completely disregarding any notion of dignity. In the main hall, Elmer, my grandfather, and I sat on the sofa, looking at each other. The three of us had never been together like this before. We had all met each other in pairs previously, my grandfather and I. Of course, and Elmer was the grandson of my grandfather's war buddy, often seen in the same social circles. Even Elmer and I had just met at the bar. But the three of us together was a first, so the atmosphere was a bit awkward. One was my husband, one was my grandfather, and in this situation, I could only sit there staring, not knowing how to break the uncomfortable silence. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I've been so busy with work that I neglected Mabel," Elmer spoke up first. I had a huge question mark in my mind. What was he apologizing for? We didn't know each other before, and this was our first meeting. I was planning to orchestrate a stylish divorce later, but what was he doing now? "It's all right, I understand you've been busy with work, but you mustn't neglect family," Grandpa said, completely ignoring my inner turmoil. Although he had some criticism for Elmer, he generously forgave him for disappearing for 3 years. "What do you mean it's all right?" "It might be all right for you too, but not for me." Sensing the conversation was heading in an unwanted direction, and fearing we might end up with a happily ever after in just 2 more sentences, I grabbed Elmer's arm and headed outside. Once outside, I leaned close to Elmer's ear and hissed through gritted teeth, "What are you playing at?" "What?" Elmer turned to look at me with an innocent expression, pretending not to know what I was talking about. His voice was a bit loud, and I felt Grandpa might have heard. It was infuriating. We didn't even know each other before. "Why are you saying all this nonsense? There's no love between us. Why don't we just get divorced quietly, without telling Grandpa?" I no longer wanted to continue with my previous gradual approach. Now I just wanted to divorce him as quickly as possible. Why should we divorce? If we don't know each other, we can get to know each other slowly. I won't divorce you. "If you want a divorce, you'll have to do it yourself," Elmer said. He couldn't help but admit that he had been struck by my beauty when he first saw me last night. If he hadn't been so busy and had his assistant handle it, he wouldn't have forgotten and missed out on 3 years with me. Now that he knew, Elmer felt he couldn't let go no matter what. "We have no love. We can cultivate it slowly. But I want a divorce." "I don't." Feeling like I couldn't reason with him at all, I looked at him, seeing his stubborn expression. He was really getting on my nerves. I glared at him fiercely before walking back inside. Well, it seemed I'd have to implement my plan for a stylish divorce after all. Elmer thought to himself that he had been single for so many years. And it was rare to find someone who could make him feel so captivated. Moreover, that person happened to be his wife. He was determined not to divorce no matter what. Back in the living room, Grandpa was still sitting on the sofa. I walked over to him, looking pitiful, and said, "Grandpa, you and Elmer should go home now," Grandpa said, completely disregarding my intentions and giving his own orders. "Now that you're married, it's not appropriate for you to continue living here. You're a married woman now, and you should live with your husband. Frank, help the young lady pack her things." Hearing Crispin's words, the butler quickly went upstairs and packed my belongings at an unbelievable speed, putting them directly into Elmer's car. Then Grandpa pushed me towards the door, leaving me no time to react. I could only make futile gestures with my hands, repeatedly saying, "No, no, no. We're not suitable for each other." Faced with my protests, Grandpa just emotionlessly held the car door and said coldly, "Go on. Only by living together can a couple know if they're suitable for each other." With that, he closed the car door, completely ignoring the pitiful and helpless me inside the car. In the car, Elmer and I looked at each other, our 4 eyes darting back and forth. Neither of us spoke. I was completely stunned by Grandpa's sudden action, while Elmer was pleasantly surprised that Grandpa suddenly wanted me to live with him. When I realized that we were staring at each other in this cramped space, the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. I felt a bit uncomfortable, and my face involuntarily turned red. I turned my head away and covered my mouth with my hand, giving a light cough to hide my embarrassment. Elmer stared at me. He had been struck by my beauty when he first saw me at the moonshine bar. And now, looking at me again, he still found me stunning. My skin was delicate and fair, my features exquisite and bright, especially my eyes, which sparkled like jewels. When we had made eye contact earlier, he had forgotten to breathe. Elmer was brought back to reality by my cough. He absent-mindedly ran his hand over his face, as if wiping away something imaginary. Then turned to face the steering wheel and also gave an involuntary cough. "Shall we go then?" he asked. I responded softly. We arrived at Elmer's place, and I was surprised to find out how close it was to where we used to live. It only took a 10-minute drive. Fate is so mysterious. We had been living in the same city, so close to each other. And despite my frequent outings, I had never once bumped into him on the street. And now, just when I wanted a divorce, we met. As we got out of the car, Elmer wanted to be a gentleman and help me open the door. But as he was about to reach for it, I opened it myself and got out, pretending not to have seen his gesture as I held my head high. Elmer's hand, which was reaching for the door, froze in midair. When he realized what had happened, he pulled his hand back and gave a helpless smile. I kept my head held high, my eyes darting around, looking unapproachable as I asked, "Where's your house?" Elmer pointed, and I started walking without waiting for him. I strode forward confidently, completely ignoring my surroundings, trying to look tough. As I approached the front door, a large yellow dog suddenly appeared out of nowhere. By the time I realized what was happening, it was almost upon me. Terrified, I immediately backed away, turning and leaping onto Elmer in a koala hug, all while screaming, "Ah! Buddy," Elmer called out. Hearing Elmer's voice, the dog stopped, wagging its tail and looking quite docile. A stark contrast to its fierce approach just moments ago. You, make it go away." "I'm scared," I said, almost in tears. "You've frightened Our Lady of the house," Elmer said to the dog. Buddy looked at me, then at Elmer, and ran off. I clung to Elmer like a koala, and when my emotions had stabilized a bit, I turned my head to see that Buddy had really gone. I looked up, and our eyes met. At this distance, I could even feel Elmer's breath. His strong masculine scent enveloped me, making my heart race involuntarily. Elmer wasn't faring much better. With me in his arms, his breathing became heavier. He lowered his head as I looked up, and Elmer thought that if he leaned down just a bit more, our lips would meet. Sensing the strange atmosphere, I quickly jumped down from him and straightened my clothes. I turned and continued walking forward, only this time my steps were quicker and more erratic. It definitely wasn't because I was embarrassed and blushing that I was walking faster. No, definitely not. Elmer watched my chaotic steps from behind and couldn't help but smile before going to the boot to get the luggage. As Elmer carried my luggage straight to the room, I quickly grabbed his arm. He looked at my hand, then at me, waiting for me to speak. I glanced at him, and suddenly inappropriate images flashed through my mind. One room, a man and woman alone, nighttime, soft lighting. I imagined Elmer undressing, revealing his muscular physique, perfect six-pack abs, V-lines, firm buttocks. Oh no, what scandalous thoughts. I mustn't think like this. The more I tried not to think about it, the more I blushed, unconsciously swallowing as I completely forgot I was still holding Elmer's arm. "What are you doing?" Elmer asked, his arm in my grasp. Seeing me speechless, especially with my lecherous expression, he couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. I was still lost in my fantasy when Elmer's voice snapped me out of it. I looked up at him, then awkwardly stammered, let's stay in separate rooms." I stole a glance at him before lowering my gaze, too embarrassed to look him in the eye, fearing he'd see through my awkwardness and impure thoughts. "Oh, I see," Elmer drawled. "Let's stay together then." He deliberately started walking inside with my luggage. I panicked and tried to grab my suitcase back. Living with him was already unavoidable, but sharing a room was a step too far. Refusing to share a room was my last stand. "I'm just joking," he said, opening another door. "My room isn't this one, it's next door." Though Elmer wanted to stay with Mabel, they had only just met. Despite needing to build a relationship, he knew he couldn't rush things. The room looked bare, clearly unused. I was relieved, having feared we'd share a room. My heart had been racing at the thought. But now, knowing we wouldn't share, I felt oddly disappointed. That afternoon, I woke up groggy to the aroma of cooking. I wandered into the kitchen to find Elmer busy at work, just finishing a plate of prawns to bring to the table. "Get ready for dinner," Elmer said as he set down the prawns. I felt conflicted. I'd planned to act haughty, scheming to make him divorce me. One tactic was to avoid the kitchen and criticize him if he didn't cook, acting hypocritical. If he did cook, I'd claim it tasted awful no matter what. But the food looked and smelled delicious. After eating my fill, my scheming thoughts returned. I dramatically flopped onto the sofa, sprawling out in an unladylike manner. I made no move to clean up, hoping to provoke Elmer into scolding me, so I could use it as an excuse to argue and push for divorce. "Are you full?" Elmer asked gently, completely ignoring my antics. I replied lazily. Elmer simply got up and started clearing the dishes himself, unbothered by whether I helped or not. Watching him bustle about, I began to feel guilty. It seemed I'd gone too far. He'd cooked the entire meal and now was cleaning up alone. Shall I wash up?" I couldn't help offering, feeling bad despite my plans to act difficult. Elmer doing everything alone made me pity him somehow. "No need, you rest." "I'll take care of it," Elmer refused. This made me feel even worse. I jumped up, pushed him aside, and grabbed the dishes to wash them myself. Elmer stood there bemused, watching as I rushed to the sink and frantically started scrubbing. My speed suggested I thought someone might steal the dishes if I didn't wash them immediately. Finding me adorable, he smiled wryly. Since I was washing up, he put away the leftovers and wiped down the table. After tidying up, Elmer came to check on my progress. He was shocked to find water splashed all over the floor. I was still furiously scrubbing a single plate, despite there only being 2 place settings to wash. "What are you doing?" Elmer couldn't help asking. Startled by his question, I looked up at him, then at the wet floor, feeling embarrassed. "This plate won't come clean no matter how hard I scrub," I said innocently, holding up the dish. I'd never done housework before, always having staff at home. I didn't realize washing dishes could be so difficult. I'd been at it ages and the plate was still greasy. "You need to use washing up liquid. And we have a dishwasher, you know." "No need to wash by hand," Elmer explained, taking the plate from me and loading everything into the machine. "You'd better go, the floor's wet. Watch you don't slip," he said, gently ushering me out while grabbing a mop to clean up. The esteemed CEO, who always appeared so impeccable during television interviews, surprisingly had such a domestic side. I was stunned. Looking at the chaos in the kitchen, it was clear this wasn't my forte. I sheepishly walked out, realizing my good intentions had backfired. My guilt deepened. "Don't you usually have someone to help at home?" I couldn't resist asking, despite my initial resolve not to initiate conversation. At home, I always had housekeepers, and even during my studies abroad, I never set foot in a kitchen. "It's just me usually. My parents are abroad and don't come back. I haven't hired a personal assistant, so there's no one at home. I'm used to being alone," Elmer patiently answered my query, showing no anger over the mess I'd just made in the kitchen. As I watched his back, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity, sensing a hint of loneliness about him. Elmer and I continued our lukewarm coexistence. Although our relationship had slightly improved after he cooked for me, it didn't deter me from my various little performances. I still intended to divorce him. A small act of kindness wasn't enough to sway me. My real purpose in living with him was to act out and make him fed up, not to empathize and compromise. After a period of boredom, Daphne invited me to go shopping at the mall over the weekend. I thought this was another opportunity. That evening, while Elmer was cooking, I spoke up directly. In other couples, husbands usually hand over their salary cards to their wives to spend. "As your wife, how come I've never seen your salary card?" I stared at him intently, hoping inwardly that he would refuse, giving me a chance to start another big argument and push for divorce. "Here, take it," Elmer said without hesitation, handing me a black card. No reluctance at all? I miscalculated. I had thought he would refuse, but he was unexpectedly generous. I silently accepted the card. On the weekend at the mall, Daphne had already arrived. Seeing the dazzling array of products, I had another idea. I grabbed Daphne's hand and headed straight for the luxury stores. I decided to go on a massive spending spree with this card, to show Elmer how much I could spend. Ideally, I wanted to max out the card and make Elmer angry enough to call me. After a shopping spree, my hands were full of purchases. One swipe, and £1,000,000 disappeared, but the card still wasn't maxed out. By the end, I was exhausted from walking, and the main point was that despite all my spending, Elmer hadn't called to question me. Unexpectedly, it was I who couldn't bear to spend more in the end. So, I decided to make a surprise inspection at his office, catching him off guard. I planned to intentionally see him getting close to that woman and then find an excuse to argue, pushing him to his limits. I sneakily entered his lobby and sat in the waiting area, observing, waiting for the moment a woman would enter Elmer's room. Then I'd follow right in and immediately accuse him. The opportunity came. Just as I was about to take a sip of water, I saw a woman enter. I immediately stood up and rushed over, entering right on her heels. Before they could react, I started speaking, well, Elmer. While I'm at home slaving away for you, you're here. My tone was deliberately whiny, and I looked up with eyes full of tears. I had managed to summon by pinching my thighs and arms several times. The tears were on the verge of falling, making me look as pitiful as possible. What are you doing here? The moment Elmer saw me burst in, his heart rate quickened, his eyes unable to hide a hint of pleasant surprise. Even his tone of voice became much lighter, thinking I had come specially to see him. Divorce, I wanted divorce from you, you heartless man, you've betrayed me. Elmer didn't react to my performance or take the bait, so I had to continue on my own, stating my purpose. How am I heartless? Hearing me call him heartless, Elmer seemed a bit amused. I saw everything. The evidence is right here. You let her into your office, you were alone together. As I spoke, I pointed at the woman who had just entered. Look around. How many people do you see here? Faced with my accusation, Elmer calmly replied. In my rush to perform, I hadn't noticed the others in the room. Now that Elmer pointed it out, I turned my head and realized Elmer's assistant was also present. Our eyes met, and the assistant winked at me. I silently turned back, pretending to adjust my hair, then after a moment, I weakly said, "But you still let her in, and you were standing so close." At this point, being unreasonable was my only option. Although I had lost the upper hand, as long as I spoke first to shift blame, I could maintain that I wasn't in the wrong. My mistake. From now on, I'll keep at least a meter away from all women except you. Elmer immediately admitted fault without argument, showing a good attitude and fully accepting any accusation from me. Why did I feel a bit secretly pleased? I didn't want you to admit fault. I wanted you to argue with me and stand your ground. You immediately accepting all blame left me at a loss. Another failed attempt at a divorce tactic. Since moving in with Elmer, I had been so busy trying to outweed him that I had almost forgotten about Grandpa. Thinking about this, a sudden idea struck me. Yes, another opportunity had arisen. Since I couldn't succeed with Elmer, I would go to Grandpa and complain. I would tell him that living with Elmer was terrible. That Elmer had a foul temper and a domineering personality, and most importantly, that we were constantly in conflict. After living together, we had found we were completely incompatible. So I would ask Grandpa not to prevent our divorce anymore. On the weekend, I headed home with some health supplements I had bought for Grandpa. All the way there, I was planning how to pour out my grievances to him and get him to agree to the divorce. If Grandpa agreed, everything else would be easy to handle. With these thoughts, I arrived at the house. I rushed into the house, calling out excitedly, "Grandpa, I'm home." As soon as I entered the living room, before I could even start complaining about my day, I saw Elmer and Grandpa playing chess. There's no need for such a commotion, young lady. Where are your manners? Grandpa looked up briefly, a chess piece in hand, then returned to contemplating his next move, showing no particular enthusiasm for my arrival. I was stunned. Since when had Elmer become so close to Grandpa? He'd never visited our home before, yet now they seemed so familiar, sitting there playing chess together. Miss is back. Please, have a seat. Dinner will be ready shortly, Frank said as he came over, taking my things. Elmer glanced at me with a smile, but for some reason, that smile only irritated me more. I felt my jaw clench, sensing something devious in his expression. As if he knew exactly why I was here, to complain about him to Grandpa, and had come to preempt my efforts. At the dinner table, I deliberately sat far from Elmer to show my displeasure. Grandpa noticed and, brooking no argument, ordered, "Sit next to Elmer." Reluctantly, I moved to Elmer's side. Throughout the meal, everyone except me seemed to be enjoying themselves. Grandpa and Elmer chatted and laughed. And I could tell from their conversation that Grandpa thoroughly approved of his grandson-in-law. After dinner, Grandpa didn't ask us to stay, saying that newlyweds needed time to nurture their relationship and should have privacy. He practically shooed us out. I sighed inwardly, another failed attempt at initiating divorce. Back home, as I was taking off my shoes, Elmer called out from behind me, "Mabel, we need to talk." I had just put down my shoes and was about to slip on my house slippers when I heard Elmer's unusually serious tone. I paused, feeling a bit perplexed. Elmer never spoke like this normally. "Talk about what?" I asked, turning to face him after putting on my slippers. "Please, have a seat first," Elmer said gently as he changed into his own slippers behind me. At the table, we sat facing each other in silence. Just as the atmosphere was becoming uncomfortably heavy, Elmer spoke. "How do you think we've been getting along lately?" Fine, I suppose," I mumbled, trying to hide my unease. "Think about it carefully," Elmer pressed, not letting me off the hook. Elmer's sudden seriousness caught me off guard. I lowered my head, deep in thought. Reflecting on our time together, I realized that Elmer had always been accommodating, good-tempered, and tolerant of my antics. No matter what little schemes I came up with, even though he saw through them. He never argued with me, always maintaining his good nature. "It's been really good, actually," I admitted after careful consideration. I couldn't find anything to be dissatisfied with. Even his face, I noticed as I looked at him, was exactly the type I liked. Living with him, I couldn't recall a single moment of unhappiness. "Do you really want to divorce me?" Elmer asked, his gaze intense and serious. Hearing this, I was dumbfounded. Hadn't I been trying to provoke a divorce all this time? But for some reason, when Elmer asked directly, I froze, unable to answer. My heart raced, and I felt confused. After living with Elmer for so long, I wasn't sure if I truly wanted a divorce or if I had just grown accustomed to our way of life together. I had come here with the intention of divorce, but now, I found myself hesitating. "Take tonight to think it over. Tell me your decision in the morning." "I won't stand in your way," Elmer said, mustering great courage to speak these words. After all this time together, he knew that while he cared for me, feelings couldn't be forced. If I truly didn't like him, he wouldn't compel me to stay. I sat in the living room, lost in thought, recalling all the little moments Elmer and I had shared. I realized I had grown used to his presence. The idea of suddenly divorcing him made me uncomfortable. At the mere thought of leaving Elmer, I felt an emptiness inside, as if I would be losing something precious. In the morning, I had barely gotten out of bed when I found Elmer already dressed and waiting outside my door, a glass of milk in hand. He looked at me expectantly, clearly waiting for my answer. "Didn't sleep well?" "I've made you some warm milk. Drink this first," he said, handing me the glass. I took a sip, feeling a bit more alert. Then I moved past him to wash up. Elmer didn't press me for an answer, waiting for me to speak when I was ready. He felt that since he had given me the choice, I should respond when I felt prepared. But his desire to know was evident in the way he stood there, waiting for me to finish my morning routine and tell him my decision. "Let's try being like a real couple for a while," I said finally, after a night of reflection. I wasn't sure if I had fallen in love with Elmer or if I had just grown accustomed to our life together. If we were to be a couple, we'd need to change our previous way of interacting. We'd need to do things that couples do. After all, Elmer had been so patient with me for so long, and I could sense that he genuinely cared for me. Moreover, the look in his eyes just now, a mix of hope and silent pleading, made it impossible for me to refuse outright. Hearing my suggestion to try being a real couple, Elmer's entire demeanor changed. He looked as if he'd won the lottery, having prepared himself for rejection. Last night hadn't been easy for either of us. Elmer, too, had lain awake until dawn. After giving me time to think, he had immediately regretted it, fearing that I might actually refuse him. He worried that he hadn't done enough, that we hadn't spent enough time together, and that I might reject him because of this. He thought that with more time, I might happily choose to be with him. After agreeing to act like a couple with Elmer, we both felt awkward. Fortunately, Elmer had to go to work. He initially wanted to stay home with me, but I was too embarrassed and needed some time to adjust, so I encouraged him to go to work. Sitting in his office, Elmer felt elated. Having grown up as a loner with a monotonous life, he was supposed to be serious as a CEO. However, he couldn't keep a straight face in his office. He would occasionally break into a silly grin, smiling whenever he thought of Mabel, completely at odds with his usual stern demeanor. Sometimes when his secretary came in to report, Elmer couldn't contain himself. The secretary was utterly baffled, feeling that the CEO was acting strangely today, giving him inexplicable smiles. Seeing his boss's expression, the secretary couldn't help but get goosebumps and hurried out after finishing his report. Afraid the CEO might do something to him. Finally making it to the end of the workday, Elmer waited for everyone to leave. Usually, he would either work overtime or stay late, always busy with various tasks until midnight. But now, even though he still had a lot to deal with, Elmer felt a bit impatient. He thought he might be developing a lovesick brain. I didn't go anywhere today, just sitting idly at home. I didn't even go out with my friends. The sudden change in our relationship status made me feel a bit uncomfortable and very shy. I didn't know how to face people, afraid my friends would notice something different and tease me. I'm too thin-skinned. Before, when I married Elmer, he didn't show up, so I never took it seriously. I always presented myself as single to others. When Elmer appeared, I was busy preparing for our divorce, so I didn't tell anyone about it. I was just waiting to divorce him and return to my original state, without planning to let anyone know about this. Now if they found out I was dating, and even already married to Elmer, they would definitely make fun of me. Just thinking about it made me blush uncontrollably. Although I've grown up, I've had zero dating experience. Now that I'm suddenly in a relationship, I'm really too embarrassed to face anyone. So after some thought, I decided it was safer to stay at home. It's best not to see anyone. If I did, I would definitely give myself away. Thinking this way, I ended up being a complete couch potato for the day. Doing nothing but sitting on the sofa and chatting casually with Elmer on WhatsApp. As it was almost time for him to get off work and come home, I don't know why, but my heart started racing. I felt both excited and a bit scared about Elmer's return, my emotions quite complex. Previously, interacting with Elmer felt relaxed, I could do whatever I wanted. Now with our sudden change in status, I suddenly felt like I didn't know what to do anymore. In a moment, Elmer would be back, and I didn't know how to act or what to do. As I was thinking this, there was a knock at the door. Elmer was back. No time to think anymore, I suddenly stood up. Just moments ago I was sprawled on the sofa, and now I rushed to the door. The moment Elmer opened the door, I immediately put on a different expression. You're back. My tone was as gentle as could be, my voice deliberately high-pitched. Elmer had been full of anticipation, eagerly thinking about coming back to see me. But when he opened the door and saw me standing with my hands clasped in front of my waist, a smile on my face deliberately showing 8 teeth, my posture ramrod straight, and speaking in a baby voice, he took half a step back with a look of disbelief. Are you seriously stepping back? The gentleness I had just put on was instantly shattered by Elmer's reaction. I glared at him fiercely, feeling a bit angry. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I'm just not used to it yet. For a moment, I thought you had been possessed, Elmer said as he came in, scratching his head with an embarrassed smile. I had originally thought that since we were now in a relationship, I should change my attitude and be gentler with him. But it seemed Elmer couldn't handle that, so there was nothing more to say. Might as well give up. Let's just go back to how we were before. In the end, I couldn't hide my relationship with Elmer from Daphne and the others. After confirming our relationship, Daphne and the girls invited me out. But I kept making excuses and refusing, spending every day either eating or watching movies with Elmer, and going out to play on weekends. On one weekend, Daphne asked me to go shopping in the morning. Feeling guilty, I told her I was busy and refused, then went out with Elmer. But that evening, we ran into Daphne at the same restaurant. And she was sitting right facing the door. Just as we walked in, Daphne happened to look up, and I happened to look over. Our eyes met instantly. Daphne looked at me, then at the person beside me, and immediately understood, giving me a mischievous smile. Seeing Daphne, I immediately lowered my head, only able to act like a turtle. I let Elmer hold my hand as we walked past Daphne, hoping she would pretend not to have seen me. As we passed by Daphne, she took the opportunity to pinch my thigh hard when I wasn't paying attention. Then pretended nothing had happened and continued chatting with her friend, not even turning to look at me once. Feeling the pain in my thigh, I couldn't help but take a sharp breath, clenching my teeth hard to maintain my expression. I knew she had seen me just now, and had seen Elmer too, but she was acting completely nonchalant. I had thought she would let me off and settle accounts with me later. Enduring the pain, I walked in with Elmer. Elmer didn't know them, so he casually chose a window seat and sat down, unfortunately close to Daphne and her friends again. On the surface, I was as steady as a rock, but inside I was freaking out. I wanted to ask Elmer to change seats, but I didn't know how to bring it up, so I could only sit down nervously. Sitting there, I felt like I was on pins and needles, especially afraid that Daphne and her friends might pull some tricks. I was sitting right behind Daphne, keeping my head low and looking deflated. Terribly afraid they might suddenly shout or make some commotion, or worse, come over to our table. Thankfully, throughout the whole process, they didn't come to our table. Daphne just kept coughing, and very loudly at that, occasionally moving around. I really don't know how to describe my feelings. Anyway, I had no appetite for dinner that night, constantly on alert for their movements. Every little noise they made caused my heart to skip a beat. Finally, they left, and we were also almost done eating. Spill it, who is he? As expected, I couldn't escape the interrogation. After returning home from dinner that day, I knew I couldn't avoid a round of questioning. I sat in the center of the group, with Daphne at the helm, surrounded on all sides with no chance to escape. I looked at Daphne, then at the others, lowered my head, and curled up. I silently raised my hands in surrender, looking pitiful, hoping they would let me off. Don't think you can get away with just an innocent look. I'm telling you, it won't work. Humph, you said you had important things to do, so this was your important business? Saying this, Daphne was fuming. She had been trying to meet up with me for ages but could never make it happen. I always said I was busy. This girl completely forgot about her friends once she got a man, totally lovesick. Having a man and abandoning her friends, it was infuriating. Oh, come on. I grabbed Daphne's hand and shook it, feeling a bit guilty. Indeed, recently I had been neglecting them because I was trying to act like a couple with Elmer. It was a bit inconsiderate, but I'm already so old and had never dated before. Suddenly having this experience, I was completely immersed in the sweetness. It was understandable. How far have you two gone? Have you kissed, hugged, done anything more? What base are you on? Hearing my explanation, they suddenly found it intriguing. This was completely like a TV drama plot. Married for 3 years, husband doesn't show up. Then suddenly appears as a knight in shining armor, then through a series of coincidences they get to know each other. With various little squabbles before finally getting together. This was totally the plot of a drama about a domineering CEO and his dramatic little wife. We've only held hands. I was stunned by their questions. Although I had agreed to try things out with Elmer, up until now. We had only limited ourselves to eating meals, watching movies, and holding hands. Nothing else had happened. When they asked, I suddenly felt embarrassed. What? You haven't even kissed? Is this some pure love story? Hearing that nothing had happened between us, they all stared at me with shock in their eyes. Well, I didn't know what to say. Being stared at like this, I couldn't help but squirm, feeling uncomfortable all over. Is this something that can be discussed openly? It's not that I don't want to, but shouldn't these things happen naturally? Although I want it too, as a girl, I can't be too forceful, right? You're incredible. Daphne gave me a thumbs up, impressed by my pure love warrior status. I felt like I was being tortured during this chat. The whole time, I was either being interrogated or made fun of. From start to finish, my face felt like it was on fire. Even as they were leaving, they didn't let me off, grabbing my hand and telling me that tonight I should make a breakthrough, at least get a kiss. When I got home, I was in a daze. My head was full of thoughts about kissing Elmer. Nothing had happened yet, but as I imagined the scene in my mind, I got more and more embarrassed until I felt like I was about to suffocate. Elmer came home and saw me sitting on the sofa, my face flushed red. He walked over to me, originally intending to check if I was all right. As soon as I saw him, my first reaction was to kiss him. Our eyes met, neither of us moving, just kissing like that. For a moment, my mind went blank, not knowing how to react. Elmer was stunned for a moment, then came to his senses. He held my head and continued the kiss. Everything flowed naturally from there. When I woke up in the morning and felt the light, I moved my eyeballs a bit before opening my eyes. I saw Elmer lying on his side, looking at me with a smile. He said, "Good morning." I reacted as if I'd seen a wild beast, immediately pulling the covers up over my head. Oh my God, my mind was full of those not safe for work scenes from last night. It was so embarrassing, especially with the male lead of those scenes right beside me. Although I had initiated it and I was very happy, I really felt like I didn't have the courage to face all of this. "I'll go make breakfast," Elmer said, getting up to prepare our meal. After much hesitation, I finally got up too. "Let's go visit Granddad," Elmer suggested. Previously, he hadn't felt much about it, probably because his relationship with Mabel had been awkward. Visiting Granddad then had felt normal and casual. But this time, Elmer was much more nervous. Although he appeared calm on the surface, when we went to the supermarket to buy supplements for Granddad, he couldn't help but grab everything he saw, feeling like we needed to be more formal. He even bought himself a new suit, acting as if he was preparing for a major battle. Watching Elmer bustle about, I knew I hadn't fallen for the wrong person. Granddad would bless me, and my friends would bless me too once they knew what kind of person he was. All those who loved me would bless me. Once everything was ready, Elmer called for me. Hearing his voice, I looked over and saw him standing by the car door, smiling at me gently. I happily ran over, took his hand, and got in the car as we drove off to Grandpa's house.